Released in 2016, Una is the feature film debut by Benedict Andrews, who mostly worked in theater before, and this material right here actually is an adapted version of the play Blackbird by David Harrow, a production which has had worldwide success in many different incarnations and even played on Broadway with the main characters portrayed by Jeff Daniels and Michelle Williams respectively. It tackles a very difficult, controversial subject matter, child abuse, and does so from a few different points of view. Mostly focusing though on the experience of the victim of this abuse, the titular character herself, portrayed by Rooney Mara as the grown-up Una. We get a little glimpse in the life of the man who abused her, who is claiming he truly loved her. He is the character of Ray, portrayed by Ben Mendelsohn. We never really know if he is honest with her, or us as an audience for that matter, so it's a real tightrope performance for both actors. Early on in the film, we start with a more objective viewpoint, coming at it from the angle of the law, which makes things very clear. It's a crime. He did something wrong, gets a sentence. He should have known better. She couldn't have known better. She was only 12 or 13 at the most, a child who didn't know what happened. That's what she was probably told in court, that she was confused and taken advantage of. We know that's what her parents told her. They had to explain what happened to me, she says at one point. And although all of this is true, it doesn't make things easier for her. Just stating the facts of the matter doesn't help her in any way. But this is the definitive reality that is presented to her. From an outsider's perspective, meaning neither Una or Ray, from the perspective of the other adults, the judges, therapists, or parents, it all seems very clear, and I think that clarity is represented in the filmmaking itself. All of the camera movements are very precise, the framing is very clean, everything is set up perfectly. A little bit like David Fincher visually constructs his films with almost no shoulder camera or even shaky moments of any kind. We don't even get atmospheric sound, although some scenes take place in realistically loud locations. It's all extremely reduced to narrow everything down to its bare minimum. The only moment we get something raw and imperfect is when we look directly at her during the first hearing. It's the POV of the camera that's used by the court for her statement. It's grainy, cropped at the sides, there are jump cuts in the footage, and right before the main title appears on screen, she even breaks the fourth wall looking directly at us. This is her state of mind, and things are not clear. Instead of giving her testimony, she even asks questions, which is unheard of, directed at him, who sits in another room. Why did you leave me? That is also one of the questions that will be repeated in their present confrontation. So on the one hand, we have this very clear and precise scenery, like the warehouse the bulk of the film is set in. Things are put in order where they belong, tidied up. Even the movements of the actors in this space and their dialogue are exceptionally precise. Do you think about me? Do you masturbate? Do you come? On the other hand, though, the things discussed and the emotions connected to that are immensely complicated, maybe even unclear to the both of them. Though that's up for debate. She still seems to have many unanswered questions that have haunted her for her whole adult life. He might also have questions, but contrary to her, is too afraid or not willing to ask them. We now see her taking advantage of his fears and using them to confront him. Also using her body in some moments to gain power over him, her sexuality, which could be interpreted in a simple psychological way. She's trying to reverse the roles, to dominate, maybe even manipulate him, as he did with her when she was a child. It should be noted at this point that the film is not told chronologically. Instead, we jump back and forth between past and present, implying that they remember back to their first encounter and are now, in the present, still trying to figure these things out for themselves at least. Like I said, she especially is asking a lot of direct questions, and undoubtedly that is what the film centers around. She seeks him out after all these years, confronts him with everything that is still unclear to her, and longs for some kind of closure. Not changing what happened, because nothing ever will, but trying to make sense of it as much as that's possible. And I think at its core, that is the most daring, the most controversial question this film raises. Does she need him to explain this to her, and to what end? For what purpose? Forgiveness? Acceptance? Because he seems to have been able to move on, live a quote-unquote normal life, which she was never able to. She just knew how she felt back then, and suddenly was told something different by everyone else, but was denied to ever speak to him about it ever again. So certain questions and traumatic events never got resolved for her, and apparently even more so questions like, why did you leave me, as opposed to, why did you sexually abuse me when I was just a child? It's interesting that she even acknowledges that she wasn't wise beyond her years, as he puts it. At that age, she really couldn't have known what happened to her, but even afterwards, nobody explained it to her in a way that made sense for her emotionally back then, and maybe even now. The court ruled quickly. Her father died shortly after, she says. She lost all her friends, but kept living in the same neighborhood, the same house, and she even put blame on her mother for trying to cover everything up. She really was left to her own devices, confused, powerless, and full of shame. In the course of the film, we step by step see her overcoming this struggle, but not necessarily in a planned, effective, methodical way. It's just the only way for her out, so she pursues it very aggressively and determined. But there are still moments in which we realize that she doesn't know exactly what she's doing. She offers sex to different people, she dresses up and puts lipstick on for him, but then she vomits right before she's about to meet him and breaks down in tears several times throughout their confrontation. It's only at the very end, after she has absolute confirmation that there were or are no other girls in his life, that she can walk away from it with confidence, leaving him behind and disappearing into the darkness. She just needed this information, not to make things right, but to put this event that dominated her whole life into context, into any kind of context, because it was just sitting there, unexplained, hovering above her like a sword that anytime she tried to get up and leave would cut her, leaving even deeper wounds. So the movie ends on this very unsettling note, maybe the most intense scene of the whole film, when she follows him to the party at his home and eventually lays down in the bedroom of his newly adopted daughter. It's in this very moment that you almost get the feeling that she does not want to ask the little girl, the daughter of his new girlfriend, does he touch you? Does he molest you? But rather, in a really disturbing way, it feels like she wants to ask him, do you touch her? Or am I truly the only one? And whether that's true or not, or whatever that would mean to her, I think we can agree that she leaves this film stronger than she was at the beginning, which is just the point in the story we're left at, and should in no way be misunderstood for a general statement of any kind. Compared to something like Under the Skin, which I've discussed before, I think this is a very personal film, showing the fate of a single person and maybe not offering a broader picture of humanity as a whole. If you ask me, that's the way it should be seen, but in that alone there's so much to unpack and discuss that I think it offers enough food for thought for everyone. And outside of that, it is just a well-crafted film, with some of my favorite actors giving truly intense, yet still believable and very human performances. So, in my opinion, it's a film that should definitely be watched, and afterwards, questions should be asked.